and stories of His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche, head of the Drikung Kagyu. I'm skipping some parts because, things are moving very fast in the US nowadays. We are getting ready for our 2024 elections. So I think it's good for some people to learn about the politics of the side of, Tibetan Buddhism. It's not just all flowers and cakes and, kumbaya, as one of my professors at Claremont used to say. We should all just do kumbaya if Hobbes was wrong, like he was really huge on Hobbes. I mean, as a woman, I feel like every woman knows at some point in her life, and they don't even have to read Hobbes to know, like, okay, there is anarchy and there's danger in anarchy. But in college, people rely on, like, this guy named Hobbes. So yeah, you guys can read his book Leviathan to, be pretentious or not. If you're a woman, you don't have to. Okay. In India, Rinpoche had the status of a refugee, and to travel to the United States, he had to acquire an Indian registration certificate and then an identity certificate. The process first required exhaustive interrogations by the secret services. And every day he met with members of various intelligence organizations, one of which seemed to be specifically concerned with Tibetan matters, while another was active in international espionage. No. They wanted to know in detail about the political situation in Tibet. Om Ahom Vajra Guru Pedma Siddhi Ho. We are doing Guru Rinpoche mantras accumulations as well. He traveled a lot even before the existence of modern states, but we're in the age of modernity now. About the strength of the Chinese army, their camps, how informers were recruited, and so on. A third group from the domestic secret service wanted to know how Rinpoche had succeeded in escaping, and especially how he had managed to enter India without being noticed. Rinpoche mentioned nothing about the help from the Dalai Lama's office in Kathmandu or his mysterious traveling companion. He simply hadn't been checked at some border crossing. He couldn't remember its name. It was the truth. Yeah, like when I was working, I would not remember any of the things that happened in India if I'm super focused on my work in the US. That's just how, you get stressed and your memory somehow just goes bonkers. The interrogations in New Delhi were conducted where Rinpoche was staying, in the home of his aunt Tsering Droma and her husband Gelek Rinpoche. Chetsang Rinpoche remembered seeing Demo Rinpoche, Gelek Rinpoche's father, hounded across the Barkhor and vilified. It all seemed like yesterday. Barkhor is somewhere special. I think there's some ritual significance, but it's blanking out right now. You guys can check. Barkhor. Gelek Rinpoche was the director of the Tibetan section of All India Radio and was well acquainted with many officials, and so was of tremendous help in shortening the lengthy process he had to endure, making those connections. There's this really cool film also recently shot, musically directed by Amit Trivedi. And it is about that time in India where technology just came in for the masses to, start recording their own songs. Not just like the elite, but like some newcomers were coming in, because nepotism is a huge topic in Bollywood nowadays, and we tend to forget how recent these modern communications arrived even. So yeah, it's I think it's called Bulbul or something, like songbird. So the main character is a woman who's an outsider to this whole elite circle, and then she's trying to prove herself as a singer, and how she gets effed over and backstabbed, etc., etc. So it's kind of dark as well. Okay, so we have pictures of them together in India. The Ladakh Buddha Vihara, so nice. So Dundu Namgyal Tsarong, Chetsang Rinpoche, Lama Lopsang, and Gelek Rinpoche. So notice Chetsang Rinpoche is wearing a shirt. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama, when he first arrived in India, he was also wearing a shirt. And there's like a picture of him with like Gandhi shepherdmen to like prove to people he's in India. Yeah, like the whole optics of lamas is a very interesting subject that, like, you know, academics should research on more and not just leave it to us lay people. Anyways, the chairman of the Minorities Commission and member of the Indian Parliament, Bakula Rinpoche, who had held some of the highest offices in the Indian government, also assisted Chetsang Rinpoche to the best of his ability during the endless interrogations. Bakula had met Rinpoche once in Tibet, and soon after Rinpoche's arrival in Dharamshala, he invited him to tea and informed him that in India he could expect an intimidating bureaucracy with many questions and even more problems. Can you imagine the extent of American intelligence now in India? Like, no. It is not the same. I'm pretty sure they've scaled down a lot because of the recent, you know, Russia-Ukraine stuff. Lama Lobsang, a member of the Indian government's Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes Commission, also supported Chetsang Rinpoche with all of the resources at his command. In India, stacks of documents tended to gather dust on the desk of a bureaucrat until one by one each file was slowly passed on to the next civil servant and placed at the bottom of his tall stack of documents. Only a bribe would help a file move from the bottom of the stack to the top. It's true. I've never bribed anybody, but it's true. Gelek Rinpoche always seemed to find a way to keep Chetsang Rinpoche's files moving through this labyrinth sequence of bureaucratic offices. Labyrinthine. So like a labyrinth, but not a labyrinth. Through this labyrinthine sequence of bureaucratic offices, he placed phone calls, sometimes arranging small perks for the bureaucrats and sometimes applying pressure. There's also a book called Paper Tiger by this Indian anthropologist about this, and it's pretty interesting as well. As soon as the file moved to the next office, Gelek Rinpoche would find out where it was, and he would pay a call on the departmental director in charge. The meetings with the section heads were yet another kind of amazing new experience for Chetsang Rinpoche. No one ever turned up for work on time, and when they did appear, they had lengthy conversations with their subordinates in the office, ordered chai, and debated endlessly with friends and acquaintances. Around noon, they would disappear for an extensive lunch and then return to continue chatting, and they were always the first to leave the office at the end of the day. Like, I need this mentality right now. Like, I can't be on my full potential for some reason because of the external environment. But yeah, it's very cool that other people in other parts of the world live like that, for me personally. Gelek Rinpoche tracked and pushed Chetsang Rinpoche's files for 3 months, handing out banknotes to lower, middle, and high-ranking officials to keep the files moving on to the next office. Finally, Chetsang Rinpoche got his refugee identity certificate. Woo! There's also this really famous celebrity, YouTuber. Her name is Lobsang22, and I only recently learned about her, and she's such an interesting and pretty person to observe. And like, she created a lot of drama within the refugee community because she's like a femme fatale and like super like airy like me, like airhead is. So like, she doesn't really know like the consequences of some of her words. And it's like a very tense political situation even today, like, and she's not part of the monastic order, so there's nobody to tell her like, yo girls, chill, you know. And anyway, so I think she's been taken under the wing of the European Tibetan community, I think, by now. But yeah, like some weeks ago things were pretty cray. So yeah, he had mixed feelings when he called on the American embassy, dreading the thought of another bureaucratic process, but all he had to do was to swear formally that the information on his identity certificate was true and accurate and submit to a medical examination. In the embassy, he was handed a thick, sealed envelope that he was not allowed to open, but was to hand over to the authorities upon arrival at the airport. In the fall of 1975, Chetsang Rinpoche and his father disembarked at Newark Airport in New Jersey. I was born in New Jersey. An immigration official helped them fill out the confusing forms and guided Rinpoche to a separate room where he handed her the envelope he had been given in Delhi. While his father waited outside, Rinpoche sat on the sofa, sitting on the sofa right now, and examined the many unknown things in his new surroundings. An air conditioner, a vending machine, a color television set broadcasting a baseball game with the sound turned off until a friendly-looking police officer appeared and handed Chetsang Rinpoche a green card still warm from the printing machine. He's legal now. Rinpoche's father shook his head in disbelief. He had to wait 3 years to get his green card. So see how these things change? Okay. Rinpoche accepted it with equanimity, accustomed to having obstacles suddenly melt away before him. So yeah, like from a mundane perspective, it's politics. From a spiritual perspective, it's because he's Chetsang Rinpoche, and check out his photo. Okay, who's who? Lobsang Samten, the brother of the Dalai Lama, His Holiness Chetsang Rinpoche, Dundun Namgyal Tsaro, Namgyal Lama in New Jersey. So this is a woman, in case you guys weren't familiar with Tibetan names. So yeah, and Lobsang is a gender-neutral name, so he's also Lobsang, and then we have like Lobsang 22, the hot mess. His sister Namgyal Lama and her husband Lobsang Samten picked them up at the airport. Oh, so he's like the brother-in-law of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. I just realized this. Okay, they drove to Namla and Lobsang's home in Scotch Plains, New Jersey, one of the many indistinguishable suburbs of New York. Like His Holiness right now is in Syracuse, away from the eyes and ears of whatever enemy there might be of him. Namla could hardly believe that her brother had escaped. It had been so completely improbable they had given up all hope, and now he was there, standing before her. The Mongolian Geshe Nawang Wangyal, who lived nearby and had gathered many disciples, was visiting just then. He was straightforward, open-hearted. He knew Chetsang Rinpoche's grandfather well. He embraced the Kyapgon Rinpoche warmly and pressed a $100 bill into his hand in greeting. Get those Benjamins. Okay, Rinpoche did not want to take it, but Geshe Wangyal insisted, saying that his grandfather Tarong had often helped him and his family, and it was the least he could do. He also invited Rinpoche to come and visit him anytime. Oh, so sweet. See how we need to pull each other up in times of need. Okay, in the days that followed, Rinpoche had to get used to the fact that there was no one here who gave orders and no place where he had to appear and submit reports. The unaccustomed freedom was disconcerting. In Tibet, he and others of his class were treated with condescension and contempt. Rinpoche had been able to avoid some of the worst of it, mainly because he had heeded Gochok Rinpoche's warnings and stayed in school, but he had still been subjected to malice and hostility, and he had been compelled to constantly monitor what he had said and did. Now he began to see his experiences in a new light, and he realized how productive they had been for the practice of patience and compassion. His parents owned a large, attractive house not far from Namla, but it had been rented out because they had moved to Texas, where his mother anxiously awaited his arrival. His younger brother, Paljor, was studying anthropology in Wisconsin. After spending a few days with Namla and Lobsang Samten, Chetsang Rinpoche traveled on to Texas and moved in with his parents in an apartment near Galveston, not far from Houston. Wanting to put some weight on her emaciated son, Rinpoche's mother happily dragged him from one restaurant to the next. There's a lot of good Indian restaurants in Texas too. I haven't tried, but I just know. Yeah. In the winter of 1975, Rinpoche took his first extended trip with his mother. They went by Greyhound bus to visit Paljor and his Brazilian wife Sarah in Minneapolis, where Paljor was attending the University of Minnesota for a semester. Rinpoche was absorbed by the many and varied landscapes they traveled through, and the dismal roadside restaurants where the bus stopped also made an impression. The icy wind blowing in Minneapolis was even colder than a Lhasa wind when Rinpoche met with his younger brother, each of them trying to connect the young man now before him with the brother in his childhood memories. As an anthropology student, Paul Jor had many questions about what Tibet was now like, and Rinpoche provided detailed answers. His parents also hoped that their son would tell them about his time in Tibet, but didn't press him, as they had no idea what he might have gone through. Perhaps they also feared they might hear things they would rather not know about. Rinpoche felt no urge to go into detail about the past right away. He wanted to explore and enjoy his freedom instead. His parents drove him many places to visit their Tibetan and American friends, and in the evenings his father taught him the basics of English. Rinpoche gradually began to tell his father about Tibet under Chinese communist rule, and his father was outraged that, as he saw it, Tritsub Rinpoche had treated him so badly. But Rinpoche never spoke with bitterness or blamed about the terrible events of his youth. He maintained a compassionate tone in all that he related, whether about narrow-minded monastery administrators, Tritsub Jabra, or their communist rulers. He always took their positive efforts and intentions into account, their fears and worries, and the limitations of their understanding. His parents had moved to Houston because his father had become involved with the Chakpori Ling Healing Foundation, run by an unusual man who called himself Norbu Chen and who claimed to be a Tibetan Lama. Norbu Chen was a small, effervescent American whose real name was Michael Alexander. He had studied Tibetan Buddhism and had caused a considerable stir as a healer thanks to financial and social support from tobacco heiress and billionaire Doris Duke and several other minor celebrities. He was a controversial figure, and many wild rumors about him were in circulation, some of which he himself had started. So this is an interesting book about spirituality in America, and I recommend everyone who's interested in spirituality in America to check it out. And she mentions, like, in the pre-New Age America, there was like the Scarlet Sisters, and they advocated for a lot of controversial things as well. So she analyzed, wars seemed to wreak havoc and break families apart. So then capitalism came to give comfort. This is like an interesting analysis about like America and their tryst with spirituality. And so yeah, you can read about it in context with like this Texas dude. I've only hearing about this from this biography. Despite his flamboyant claims, there was no scarcity of people who were convinced that Norbu Chen had healed them, including Dundul Namgyal Tsarum, who had finally been relieved of the chronic problems that had defeated Indian, Swiss, and mainstream American doctors. Ooh, which Indian though? Because in American popular imagination, like Native Americans also have like healing abilities, and then there's like the Indians, like there's a J. Hanuman Astrology Center in New York. Chetsang Rinpoche's brother Paul Jor came to Texas during a summer vacation and taught him to drive. Good learning skills, good survival skills. On Sundays, they cruised around the extensive parking lots in front of the shopping centers. Soon, Rinpoche was steering the car down side streets with little traffic, then on busy highways. Driving itself was not a problem, but the written exam presented a major obstacle because Rinpoche still knew very little English. This is like an astrology chart. After he failed the written exam, Paul Jor had a brilliant idea. They drove to a small town outside of Houston, and the two brothers registered for the exam separately and sat down far apart in the small bare room. Rinpoche just checked the boxes of the multiple choice test at random, and they surreptitiously exchanged their answer sheets while standing in line to hand them in. Rinpoche got his license. When he tells the story, he laughs and adds, Paul Jor flunked, his brother flunked. So yeah, they're like new immigrants of the Asian community, and other Asians are making videos about how they're cheating and how that's the worst sin possible, and we're just like, come on. You just got here and you're telling people who just got here to not do things that you did when you just got here. Anyways, that's just my take. Okay, thanks so much for listening, and see you guys in the next episode. Omaha Madra Group Himasidio.